I knew something was wrong the moment the dust cloud appeared at the end of my dirt road. Out here, miles away from the nearest paved street, nothing moved unless it had a reason. And whatever was coming toward my farm had a purpose, one I hadn't agreed to. Three black SUVs rolled through my gate like they owned the land. No hesitation, no call ahead. Just straight through the fence line I built with my own hands. I stepped off the porch slowly, boots hitting the dry ground with deliberate weight. My dog Ranger stood beside me, low growl rumbling in his chest. He sensed it too. This wasn't normal. The vehicle stopped in a neat line. Doors opened in sync. 5 people stepped out, all wearing matching polo shirts with a logo I instantly recognized. The HOA. That made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane. My farm wasn't even inside their jurisdiction. One of them, a tall man with a clipboard and an overinflated sense of authority, walked forward like he expected applause. "Sir," he called out, "this property is in violation of community standards." I didn't move. "You're about 5 miles outside your community." He ignored that. Of course he did. "We've received multiple complaints. Livestock visibility, fencing irregularities, and unapproved structures." I glanced back at my barn, then my fields, then back at him. "You mean a farm?" The others shifted awkwardly, but clipboard guy pressed on. "We are the HOA patrol team. We've been authorized to conduct an inspection." That's when I noticed something else. 2 of them were already walking toward my barn. Without asking, without permission. That was their first mistake. "Stop," I said, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut through steel. They didn't. Ranger barked once, loud and commanding. The kind of bark that makes people rethink bad decisions. Still, they kept walking. Clipboard guy sighed like I was the inconvenience. "Sir, if you interfere, we'll be forced to escalate this situation." I smiled then, not because I was amused, but because they had no idea what they'd just stepped into. "Escalate," I repeated. "You already did, the moment you crossed that gate." One of them reached my barn door and pulled it open. And that's when everything changed. Because what they saw inside wasn't what they expected. Not even close. And within seconds, their entire inspection turned into something none of them were prepared for. Not the clipboard guy, not his little patrol team, and definitely not the HOA that sent them. They thought they were walking onto just another property they could control. They were wrong. Very, very wrong. The moment that barn door creaked open, the entire tone shifted. One of the HOA patrol members froze mid-step. The other stumbled backward so fast he nearly tripped over the threshold. I didn't need to look to know what they were seeing. I already knew what was inside. But they didn't. And that was the problem. "Sir!" one of them called out, his voice no longer confident. "You didn't disclose this." I walked toward them slowly, Ranger pacing beside me like a shadow. "You didn't ask." Clipboard guy pushed past his team, clearly annoyed that his authority was slipping. "Step aside," he snapped, forcing his way to the front. Then he looked inside, and just like that, his expression collapsed. Gone was the smug confidence. Gone was the rehearsed authority. In its place, pure confusion, mixed with something else. Concern. Inside the barn wasn't just hay bales and tools. It wasn't some messy, unregulated structure they could photograph and fine me for. It was organized, controlled, professional. Rows of equipment lined the walls, industrial grade, secured, maintained. Better than anything they'd ever seen in their perfectly trimmed, suburban neighborhoods. And in the center? Crates. Locked, numbered, marked. Clipboard guy swallowed. "What is this?" I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch. Let them sit in their own assumptions. One of the patrol members whispered, "This doesn't look like a farm operation." "No," I said calmly, "it doesn't." That's when one of them did something incredibly stupid. He stepped inside, uninvited, unaware. His foot had barely crossed the line when a sharp mechanical click echoed through the barn. He froze, Everyone did. What was that? Someone asked, panic creeping into their voice. I sighed. That was your last warning. Clipboard guy turned to me, anger flashing as he tried to regain control. Are you threatening us? No, I replied evenly. I'm explaining your situation. Ranger let out a low growl again, and this time, nobody ignored it. The man inside the barn slowly raised his hands. I didn't touch anything! You didn't have to, I said. You crossed into a restricted zone. The words hit them harder than anything else I'd said. Restricted zone. Now they were starting to understand, but only partially. And partial understanding is dangerous. Clipboard guy straightened his posture, forcing authority back into his voice. If this is some kind of illegal operation, I cut him off. You really should stop talking. He didn't. Another mistake. We will involve law enforcement immediately. That's when I finally smiled again. Good, I said, because they're already involved. Silence, heavy, crushing silence. One of the team members stepped back. What does that mean? It meant everything had just flipped. They came here thinking they had power, control, authority. But now, they were standing in the middle of something far bigger than an HOA complaint. Something they weren't cleared to see, and definitely not authorized to interfere with. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, sirens, getting closer, fast. The sirens grew louder with every passing second, echoing across the open fields like a warning none of them could ignore. The HOA patrol team stood frozen, their earlier confidence completely gone, replaced by uncertainty and fear. Clipboard guy tried to hold it together, but I could see it in his eyes. He was losing control of the situation, and he knew it. What did you do? He demanded, his voice tight. I leaned against the barn door casually. I didn't do anything. You did. When you entered without authorization. The man still standing inside the barn looked like he might pass out. Am I in trouble? That depends, I said calmly. How well do you follow instructions? I do, he stammered quickly. Good, then don't move. The sirens were close now, real close. Within moments, 2 sheriff's trucks came tearing down the dirt road, followed by a third unmarked vehicle. They didn't slow down until they reached the gate, what was left of it, and then pushed right through. Dust filled the air as the vehicles came to a sharp stop. Doors opened fast. This wasn't casual. This wasn't routine. 4 uniformed deputies stepped out first, hands already near their holsters, eyes scanning everything. Behind them, a man in plain clothes exited the unmarked SUV. And the second I saw him, I knew the situation was about to hit a whole new level. Clipboard guy stepped forward quickly, relief washing over his face. Officers! Thank God you're here. This man is operating. Stop talking! One of the deputies cut him off sharply. That shocked him. Excuse me? Clipboard guy said, offended. I said stop, the deputy repeated, firmer this time. The plainclothes officer walked straight past them and came directly to me. Everything secure? He asked. Was, I replied. Until they showed up. He nodded once, then turned his attention to the barn. And they went inside? One of them did. The officer's jaw tightened slightly. Of course he did. Now the tension shifted completely. Clipboard guy looked between us, confused. What is going on here? We have a legal right to inspect. No, the plainclothes officer said coldly. You don't. That single sentence hit harder than anything else. We are an authorized HOA patrol. Clipboard guy tried again. You are civilians, the officer interrupted. On restricted land. Interfering with an active operation. Silence. Total silence. One of the patrol members whispered. Operation? The deputies began moving quickly now, securing the area, guiding the HOA team away from the barn. Step back, all of you, one deputy ordered. The man inside the barn looked like he might collapse. Can I move now? Slowly, I told him. Hands where we can see them. He practically ran out once he was clear. Clipboard guy's voice cracked slightly. This isn't over. I looked him dead in the eye. Oh, it is, I said. Because now he wasn't in charge. He wasn't even relevant anymore, and whatever power he thought he had was about to disappear completely. The energy in the air had completely flipped. Just minutes ago, the HOA patrol team had walked onto my land like they owned it. Now, they stood clustered together near the broken gate, surrounded by deputies, their voices lowered, their confidence gone. Clipboard guy looked like he was trying to piece together a reality that no longer made sense to him. This is a misunderstanding, he insisted, though his voice lacked the strength it once had. We were responding to complaints. We followed procedure. The plainclothes officer turned to face him fully now, his expression unreadable. You forced entry onto private property, he said calmly. That's not procedure. That's trespassing. We have authority? Clipboard guy tried again. No, the officer cut him off. You have overstepped. Each word landed heavier than the last. One of the deputies stepped forward with a notepad. Names, all of you. That's when panic really started to settle in. Wait, are we being charged? One of the patrol members asked, her voice trembling. Depends, the deputy replied, on how cooperative you are from this point forward. Meanwhile, the officer motioned for me to step aside with him, a few feet away from the group. I'm guessing they didn't call ahead, he said quietly. I shook my head. Not even a warning. He exhaled slowly. Figures. What now? I asked. He glanced back at the barn, then at the patrol team. Now we clean this up. Behind us, one of the deputies had started taking photos of the tire tracks, the broken gate, even the barn entrance. Evidence. Clipboard guy noticed that too. This is unnecessary, he snapped. We didn't damage anything significant. I almost laughed. The deputy didn't. Sir, he said flatly, you drove through a secured entry point and ignored verbal commands to stop. That fence wasn't— Save it, the deputy interrupted. Another member of the patrol team stepped forward nervously. We didn't know this was restricted. That's the point, the plainclothes officer said, raising his voice just enough for them to hear. You didn't know, and you didn't ask. Silence again. Heavy, final. The man who had stepped inside the barn earlier looked the worst of all. Pale, sweating, still shaking slightly. I swear, I didn't touch anything, he said again. The officer nodded. For your sake, I hope that's true. Clipboard guy's shoulders dropped slightly. For the first time since they arrived, he looked defeated. So what happens now? He asked. The officer stepped closer to him, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel personal. Now, he said, now you explain to your HOA why sending a patrol team outside their jurisdiction just turned into a legal situation they can't control. That hit him hard, because deep down, he knew it was true. This wasn't a warning. This wasn't a fine. This was consequences. Real ones. And for the first time since they arrived, they understood exactly where they stood. By the time the sun started to dip behind the fields, the entire situation had been turned inside out. The HOA patrol team, what was left of their authority, anyway, stood quietly as deputies finished documenting everything. The same people who had stormed onto my property hours earlier were now answering questions, signing statements, and avoiding eye contact. Clipboard guy looked like a completely different person. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the attitude. Now he just looked tired and worried. One of the deputies handed him a document. This outlines the incident and your involvement. You'll be contacted for follow-up. He took it with a shaky hand. Are we being charged? The deputy gave a neutral shrug. That decision isn't mine. That uncertainty hit harder than any immediate consequence. Nearby, the rest of his team whispered among themselves, their earlier unity replaced by quiet blame and second-guessing. We shouldn't have come out here, one of them muttered. We were told it was within jurisdiction, another replied defensively. Clipboard guy didn't say anything, because he knew the truth. He hadn't verified. He hadn't checked. He just acted. And now, everyone was paying for it. The plainclothes officer walked back over to me, glancing once more at the barn before speaking. "Everything inside is secure again," he said. "Good," I replied. "Didn't expect company today." He gave a slight nod. "You handled it well." I shrugged. They handled it themselves, really. That earned the smallest hint of a smile. Across the property, one of the deputies signaled that they were wrapping up. The vehicles began to clear out, one by one, leaving behind nothing but tire tracks and a very different kind of silence. Clipboard guy hesitated before getting into his SUV. For a moment, it looked like he might say something. Apologize, maybe. Explain, but he didn't. He just got in and shut the door. The engine started, and just like that, they were gone. I stood there for a while, watching the dust settle back onto the road they came from. Ranger sat beside me, calm again, like none of it had ever happened. But it had. And it changed something, because word travels fast, especially when people in power get put in their place. The HOA would think twice before stepping outside their boundaries again. Anyone would. I turned back toward the barn, the same quiet structure that had caused all this chaos, and let out a slow breath. Some things don't need signs. Some things don't need warnings. They just need one mistake, and after today, they got theirs, out here on my land. People learn the hard way, and they don't forget.